Always mute. Oh, there we go. There we go. My mic was muted. Hello, everyone. Is everyone tonight? So glad you all could make it for another WhiskeyTuber Roundtable. This is the second one we've done. If you haven't checked out the first one, the one on Is Finished Bourbon Still Bourbon, it's in the channel, so go check that one out as well. My name is Ed, and before we introduce our guests, who are really the reason you're here tonight, you're not here for me, I do want to say hello to some folks in the chat I already see here rolling through. Bourbon Bites, who's going on after this stream. Make sure to go check out Cliff over on Bourbon Bites. Adriana R. is now Whiskey Mountains. That's a good name. I like that. There's Bourbon Bites again. Nick P, what's going on? Yes, I did shave. The beard is gone. I am negative Eddie. I am evil negative Eddie. Hey, I see the Ardolinos are in. Good to see you. Thank you. Ardolinos. Oh, there he is. There's one of our guests. Dustin, what's going on? Dustin. Cohen. So good to see you, Cohen. Icehouse, another Milwaukeean. Good to see you. Don, I haven't seen you in a minute. Good to see you, Don. Hardiman, Irish Whiskey Yoda, The Roop, Mike Bennett, Spencer. Man, everybody's here. It is good to see all of you. So, and AJ Lopez, Sancho Gutsa. All right. So, tonight we are talking about the category, or lack thereof, of American Single Malt. We're going to talk about what it is, where it stands right now, some of the malts that are on the market right now, what we like, what we don't, and what we would like to see for the future, both as a category and both as what we would like to see distillers doing and making so that we can drink it. So why don't I start out by introducing our guests for the evening, who will be joining me. First off, this is a man, a legend, an amazing human being, the only man to swim across both the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans in a single day. He is the Whiskey Dick Bill.
It's funny. I lowered my guard. I'm like, oh, good, he's not talking about me. You said, a good man, whatever. Hi, Ed. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining in.
You baby-faced looking.
I know. Look at me. I look so young. Erica says I look like a sophomore in college now.
I like that, actually. Looks good. The only downside is I can see more of your face.
Yeah, I know, right? Then we have a wonderful person. He is secretly a time traveler from the future, so his help with tonight should be very consequential. He is Bart from the Scotch Test Dummies.
Boom! All right. I already learned that suddenly I didn't know that Bill likes freshmen from college. I didn't know.
He said sophomores.
I'm sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know why. I don't know why I thought freshmen. Hello.
Nobody likes freshmen.
Are you projecting a little bit there, Bart?
It could be. Could be freshmen. That was a good year for me.
Bart does like a young Pete. He said so on multiple occasions.
Yes.
Yeah. And Bourbon Bite says, Bart stole my beard. Yeah, no, it looks like it. All right. And then we have a man who has been voted best looking on WhiskeyTube 5 years running. He is Eric Waite of Eric Waite Whiskey Studies. Hey, old man.
Oh, shit. Oh.
The professor.
Did someone let the dog out?
And, of course, bringing it up last but not least in any way, shape, or form, someone who I am proud to call my friend and who I'm pretty sure is a cyborg, the way he is able to drink for long periods of time, the master of getting plastered. It's Matt from Whiskey Crusaders.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me on.
Z is in the house.
Yeah. Gotta have power. Cyborg seems like a good one to have.
Yeah, you're in the middle of the apocalypse.
That's right. I got the whiskey supply covered, so we're good.
Yeah.
I will not run out of whiskey, I promise. Neither will my entire neighborhood.
Well, right now it's just all antifreeze.
Burn in your car, whatever need to, light fires, whatever, the shitty stuff. It's fine.
Oh God.
Hey, if worst came to worst,
that
there's
is-
some whiskey I could definitely burn. It's terrible here.
All right. Well, so we are here today talking American Single Malt. I suppose it would probably be helpful for some of our viewers to know kind of where single malt is at as a thing in America right now. For those who don't know, right now there isn't actually a legal definition of American single malt under the U.S. government. We do have something called straight malt. Straight malt is much like bourbon in that it has to be aged in new charred oak, can only be distilled up to 80%, and it has to be aged at 62.5 or less when it goes into the barrel. But the mash bill is 51% malt. That gives you 49%, of something else to play with. However, obviously, that is not really what the rest of the world usually calls malt whiskey.
Here, here.
So I know Eric and I were talking about this. Eric has a ton of examples from around the world right now of different single malts.
So this is a Scotch Glenrothes peated cask reserve. Bart, I just watched your guys' review on this. I think this morning or last night.
Beautiful.
And then here's an Irish Teeling. Here's a fusion, Indian. Bill, did you just review this?
Not
We
recently.
did.
I've done that one before.
Oh no, Matt did. So Matt did. So this Indian fusion.
That is a good one.
And then here, this is a hard one to get. This is an Australian from Tasmania, single malt. And I'm drinking the
Good
Balcones peated. But in my glass, it's almost half water now, and it's still starting to feel like it's going to remove the fillings out of my teeth at 65 point whatever 2% alcohol by volume. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna do my Balcones next. Like, God, I do love these guys.
Yes.
So good.
I'm totally with you.
Now, so right now, single malt isn't, and Bart, I would love for you to chime in on this because I know you have a lot of feelings about this. But right now, single malt in the United States is kind of a weird term of art. It doesn't actually mean anything in terms of legality of what you have to put in the bottle. But it tends to mean what a lot of other people in the world mean it to be, which is all malted mash, an all malt barley mash bill. I think we're getting a little echo. That's a little, hopefully that fixes itself. But there is a proposal on the table from a group of distillers to change that definition. And I know, Bart, would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Well, you got it's the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission. There's I don't know. I looked it up recently because we've joined just from the whiskey lovers side. Mostly distillers are in. I think there's 160. I couldn't believe the number. But I mean, of course, you got Westland, Stranahan's is in there, Del Bach, which is unbelievably good. Corsair is in. I've got their triple smoke here and Westland's over here. But the idea is it's 100% malted barley. Does not have to be virgin oak. You can do a lot of play around with the oak. It's from a single distillery. And there's a couple other things I can't remember that they're targeting in on. And I'm looking forward to it because I want a nice, if it can be classified right, and that's not for me, I'm definitely not the expert. That's for these distillers. But we'll have a strong new category that I think can go out worldwide and have some influence, just like bourbon does.
Sure.
My opinion.
I guess the question becomes, what is the benefits of having this a legal category rather than just having people run around doing whatever they want right now?
Well, they can still run around. Right now, it's Wild Wild West. It can still stay Wild Wild West, but they'll actually be, if it's called, I'm assuming, American Single Malt, you'll know it's this. which is kind of along the guidelines. I'd have to look it up to see exactly, but because I think I'm missing a couple things in there. Single distillery, 100% single malted barley, any kind of wood, I believe, or oak. Well, there's some restrictions on oak, but it doesn't have to be virgin oak. And I'll look. But the idea of that category is you'll know what that is. Just like you know that, bourbon's 51% corn. You know it's virgin oak. You know what it is if it's straight. So I like that. And then you can still be all over the place. You can still do whatever you want if you're a distiller. It just wouldn't be called 100% American single malt.
Sure. And then I know we've got quite a few. Right now we have quite a few different things that are kind of being labeled as single malt. Oh, I have another one floating around here somewhere. So these are all labeled as single malt. We've got single malt, whiskey distilled from a malt mash. And then we've got single malt, just whiskey. And then we've got single malt sherry cask whiskey.
Right. Confusing.
So it does. Once you get in this, I think that's kind of the most confusing thing for people is that single malt is not too hard to understand, right? But then you start getting into things like this, whiskey distilled from a malt mash. You've got a bunch of words there that the average consumer probably doesn't know and doesn't really care to know what exactly that means or need to know. I do
bring
think,
sorry, I was just going to say, you actually bring up a really good point that I'm glad you touched on. The stuff that goes on the bottle, like, you're just going to confuse people. I mean, like you were just saying, like, is an American single malt that's finished in sherry? I mean, like, is that within what we're trying to do here as well? I mean, or not us, but what the industry's trying to do as well. But what was the one that had like the lighter brown label? You read it was like
this guy here.
Yeah. What was that again?
This is the Menominee single malt from here in Milwaukee.
Right. You said it had a bunch of extra qualifiers on it.
Right. So whiskey distilled from a malt mash.
Right. Yeah. Like, what is that? That strikes me as similar to what I've seen on some Japanese whiskeys that are just trying to get away with something. Sure. So very, very odd.
It's funny. Yeah. It's funny Bill should mention the Japanese because they just came out with these regulations. They won't go into effect till April 1st. Now, why would you choose April Fool's Day to start something? I think that it's like, okay, just kidding. None of this applies. Just a joke.
Have some more rice whiskey. Yeah.
yeah. But there is one statement in there that I liked, and I've read it a bunch of times. Is one of the aims is for clarity to the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. For me, the two best number things you got to protect the consumer. Don't have these BS loopholes and ways of getting around things, And then number two is traditionally, what have we thought? What does single malt mean? And has there been sort of like this is the core part of single malt? And here are some peripheral things you can kind of do little differences on and still remain a single malt. For example, Irish and Scotch. Mm-hmm. Irish requires oak. Scottish requires oak. Irish does not. You can use any wood vessel. It could be a square cube, which would be stupid, but I made from some other wood.
That's a new distillery.
Marketing here.
Yes, a brand new square cube distiller.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be stupid, but you could do it.
They have
you make it out of cherry wood.
Brick house like Mario, just punching boxes of brick.
Well, you say that there's actually a distillery in Texas.
But there's a difference of two different single malts in which one you have to use oak, the other one they could use something else if they wanted to.
Sure.
And yet there's still one distillery, 100% malted barley.
Sure. So I guess that's actually a good point. I'll put it to you guys. What is the core of single malt? I mean, traditionally single malt is associated with Scotland, to a lesser extent Ireland. What is that core of single malt that we really that really defines what it is.
Barley. Barley is the main thing. I mean, to me, it's barley. And I don't really give a shit about the age. Hell, I don't even care about what wood it's in, to be real honest. I think that's more fun if you leave some more vagueness to it. Lets you do more fun experiments. But there's actually, Eric mentions there's squares. There's a distillery in Fort Worth that actually uses squares. They're called, I think, squirrel boxes. And they're different kinds of wood to do kind of crazy experiments they're doing there right now. So they do actually make them, which is pretty weird, but they're interesting. But yeah, I think that's the most important part to me is just barley and wood, but no other grains can be added to it, as far as I'm concerned.
Sure.
Right. I would agree.
5 kinds of barley? Fine, great. Balcones does it all the time with multiple kinds of barley, and it's fantastic.
Right.
Yeah.
Tom Flanagan, you can have some of my Irish wood.
You bring up an interesting point, though, Matt. Like one thing that excuse me, one thing that I would be sad to see is if by classifying it as American Single Malt, they kind of removed some of the ability to experiment. Like if you think about American whiskey just in general, without much of a classifier, it's totally the Wild West right now. You can do almost anything. And yes, having American Single Malt be a specific thing, if you said it had to be specific wood, specific whatever, sure. Except I feel like you're going to limit a lot of creativity from what is currently a really, really booming industry of a whole bunch of people trying new stuff to stick out. And there is nothing better for an industry than a whole bunch of creative people trying to get a foothold in an industry. So if you're going to limit, like, I don't know. I feel like wood in general can obviously have so much of an effect on a whiskey. Why limit that? If you guys feel differently, then I'd be
I think that's just to call it the American Single Malt, though. I mean, look at all the creativity that goes around, but it can't be called bourbon. I mean, so look at the 100% corns that are coming out. Iron root. So the Wild West, the play's still there. It's just, I think what the standardized categories give you is everybody knows exactly what they're buying, first of all. And then 2, it's highly marketable worldwide.
Now that's an interesting point, is that worldwide element. For sure. Do we want a category simply so that people who already in other countries who have an idea of what single malt is, they come to these bottlings and they're like, oh, this is what I expected.
Right. But except Matt sort of alluded to it. There's one thing I don't think you can do, which is there's both with Irish and Scotch, there's a 3-year requirement. Now, obviously, they have a completely different climate. You can't put that on Texas or India. India, where after 3 years they start losing like over 50% to angel share. So I think in terms of year requirement, that would be something they would need to be very, very flexible with. Whereas in Scotland and Ireland, they need to be a little bit tighter on that. So, I mean, what do you guys think about that?
Well, the funny thing about that is actually when you look at what they're putting out there as the potential requirements for an American Single Malt, they actually don't mention age whatsoever, which I was surprised to see. Just because I feel like let's go back to kind of what you were saying about this marketable worldwide thing. People know what a single malt is. If we're going with the assumption that they're doing this to be a premium product, right? This is the American Single Malt. People across the world are still going to look at age statements. That's just too much of an ingrained thing into people's heads to get away from.
Until they get a hold of a Balcones. And then they're going to go, what the hell does age matter? This thing's blowing my socks off.
Yeah, it's 14 months old. So it's like, who cares?
Right. Yeah. I think what they're going to see is Wild West again. They're going to think cowboys. Look at these guys. I mean, that's what I think they would see is it's the wild frontier.
Sure. I do think, and in fact, it's interesting that, when we're thinking about this idea, this Wild West kind of mentality, the legal standards for Scotch whiskey are, malt grain. It's relatively simple. Malt is 100% malt. It's made in a pot still. We should also talk about the distilling method in a second. But grain is pretty much everything else. You know, if it's made in a column, if it's not made with malt, blah, blah, blah. It's pretty much everything else. A lot of the more onerous, things that are keeping Scotch whiskey from innovating really comes from the SWA and their expectations as a trade group. So maybe there is room to still have this Wild West mentality so long as we keep the category relatively, open,
But even Scotland's changed. I think it was June 2019. We start seeing tequila casks, and we start seeing rum casks and mezcal casks. So they did go willing to move a little bit, be a little bit broader in terms of what's available. And I've never heard anybody complain about the lack of variation in aromas and flavors coming out of Scotland. In fact, there's any place that has variance and variation, it's Scotland.
So we got a tasting dummy, a non-tasting dummy.
Oh, there you go.
Well, thank you so much.
That's Scott. Awesome. That is Scott there.
Man, my heart broke for him. My heart broke for him at first. Like I was like, where do those guys go? And then all of a sudden comes on, hey, I can't taste anything anymore.
Oh, geez. That sucks. And that's been such a long saga too.
Well, he won't do the damn burnt orange. I'm like, that's the folk remedy we need to do on the channel right there.
Burnt orange.
Oh yeah. Everybody keeps telling me you got to like char this orange on a grill. And then there's all kinds of different ways you could do that. Apparently there's a show probably for how to burn your orange or something. I don't know.
Are you supposed to eat it?
No, then you open it up. It's all charred. And you squeeze out whatever burnt toasted juice is still in there. And then you got to shoot it. And apparently that shocks that node, whatever node or nodule he's got jacked up. Sorry, Scott, whatever's gently messed up there. It'll wake it up. It'll come alive.
Well, they got this stuff down in Hollywood. Yeah. It's supposed to straighten your shit out too.
Well, he'd get in trouble if he did that.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
He'd be done. He's going to call me in a second and yell at me.
John Rance is posing an interesting question. Should there be minimum age statements based on geography in the U.S. because of climate differences?
No.
Yeah, I would agree with no.
Because you need to be breaking down Texas single malt, California single malt, Colorado single malt, Iowa single malt.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I think what will happen is you will get a natural growth. It's already happening of regions. I don't know if it'll be called regions. I mean, but there will be a style that will work in, and some people will say, I love Texas American single malt style or Oregon, or Pacific, whatever. So I think that's what will happen.
Sure.
I think you're right, Bart. I think that's the natural evolution of it. You get a New England single malt or a Southern single malt. I don't know, whatever you'd call it. But that makes a lot of sense to more base it off of a region than necessarily states or ages.
And thank you, Dustin Goramagut. Dustin, that's awesome. And yes, well, we should all drink more Springbank. I think we can agree on that. But, and then I did want to say hi to Whiskey Friend. Look at that. Oh, wait, that's not it. There we are, Whiskey Friend. Dude.
I like the other one. The other one was better.
Now it must be super late for you, man. Thank you for stopping by. Appreciate that a lot. All right.
So Alan's just afraid we're going to take over the single malt world. The Americans are going to take over, and that's what he's concerned about.
Right? Yeah. Well, and I think that's an interesting point you made about variation, because I've got some of the Westland Gariana here. This is much closer to, say, a Speyside Scotch than fucking Balcones is.
Right.
Balcones is
agree.
It's a whole different ball game once you get down to Texas.
Yep.
And I would imagine that's going to happen across the country.
Yep.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. Now, to kind of what we're talking about here, though, if you were to think of regions versus something like Texas trying to do Texas single malts what I'm worried about, and you guys kind of alluded to it a minute ago too, is every single state trying to do their own thing. And I just think that's going to be obnoxious, right? But again, that's marketing teams going nuts with this whole thing. So I guess if you guys don't mind a tangent for a sec, like what do you think would be, I guess, the regions that like we were just kind of talking about, like what do you think is a reasonable amount of different areas of the US?
Well, Texas is its own region. Hell, there's 5 regions just in Texas alone.
But like, what would make Texas different than, I don't know, like any of the surrounding states? Like, obviously, Texas.
We have different climate differences between all of our regions. We have forests, we have swamps, we have arid desert. It's just vastly different states. So that's why.
And now they have snow.
Yeah, snow, which sucks ass. I hate snow. Fucking white bullshit.
I'm getting 8 inches of snow tonight, so
except for you have plows and shit that can bring that shit up. We're just fucking not any of that crap.
I think this is the first time in my life that the rest of the country has worse weather than Wisconsin.
Shit, you did have those people what in Dora County floating away on the ice on the ice. What the fuck? That shit would say helicopters and shit coming and save people off the ice floats.
God. Yeah. But no, I think that's a great question because I do think the Pacific Northwest has already started to carve out its own single malt style.
Yeah, you can feel it.
Some of that is based on, McCarthy's, for example. Some of that is
so amazing.
Local Garyana oak is part of what that is.
So good.
But I also think it is climate.
And I could picture like a lot of organic from coming up there and everything. It would just have that feel, I think.
So I think in terms of designated states and related to single malts, the only thing you would want to do is if Texas, and in fact, I'm a member of the Texas Whiskey Association and all that, even though I'm out here in California, is you want to be able to protect your brand, your identity. And if Texas develops an identity as a standard of quality, then you want to protect that. You don't want people bringing something in 100% Texas, whatever else, bringing stuff in or somewhere else using the name Texas, which is then, a crappy whiskey, which then brings down the reputation of Texas. So a lot of regulation saying that, because I'm going to bring up wine in the wine world. It has to do with people doing a lot of bogus stuff, and so they come up with regulations in order to protect the name of the Napa Valley, of Bordeaux, whatever. In fact, a lot of the regulations behind bourbon it's because of the hucksters trying to pull one over on the consumer, and so eventually Woodrow Wilson, if I recall correctly, says we got to do something about this shit and define it. And if I'm wrong, Jason over at Master General will correct me on that one. And so the legal definition isn't intended to handcuff the producer, but to protect the consumer and actually bring better integrity to the whiskey. And we as consumers and whiskey tubers, that's what we care about. We want the good stuff. We don't want to be snookered. And finally, the Japanese are starting to get their shit together. And one of the interesting thing about in Japan is one of the requirements, if I recall correctly, is it has to be bottled in Japan to be called Japanese whiskey. The only place we see that on the single malt world is in terms of bottling in Scotland or Ireland is with Irish and Scottish single malts. Blended Scotch does not have to be bottled in Scotland. You can ship it in bulk. So I think it's a little unique that Japan has actually gotten a little bit more protective of the name Japan and requiring it to be bottled in Japan. So what do you guys think about American single malt? Has to be, you can't ship it in bulk, somewhere else. You need to bottle it here in the United States. What do you guys think about that?
Yes.
Yeah. I think that makes the most sense. I think distilled, aged, bottled. Those really are the three most important steps.
It takes away the possibility you tanked it in and did God knows what to it. Yeah. That's what the tanking. I know like some of your big bourbons, like Jim Beam tanked shit over to Australia and they bottle it in Australia, but they still call it a bourbon, even though it's a 76 proof because they're stupid. But that's a different story. Cheap bastards.
Well, and actually, okay, Dustin is actually bringing up a point. Is he's saying he doesn't like the bottled rule? He thinks it just adds cost. Do you guys think? I mean, I feel like there's a certain benefit to having it bottled in that this is cost added industry. You are doing something rather than letting someone else do it. But do you guys? I don't know. Is there an argument there to be made that let them just bottle it anywhere? Just because as long as it was made here. And they don't adulterate it?
I think
so.
that's
Imagine spending money to take it out of the bottle, put your shit into it, and then put it back in the bottle or something like that. It would be not cost effective to take it out of the bottle in order to put your junk in. So therefore, it creates a disincentive to snooker the consumer by putting it in the bottle. It's the same reason why sherry used to be shipped in casks up to Scotland, and then they go, okay, now we're not doing it anymore. It's got to be sherry has to be bottled in here as Spain. Right. So, as Matt was alluding to, I think to protect the consumer, to protect single malt, I think it should be bottled in the United States. But that's just
exactly.
Well, so one other kind of.
I want to thank you, Goramagut. He's raising his Cedar Ridge chocolate single malt finished with cherry wood spirals to us. So thank you very much.
So one other kind of ethereal point to what you guys were just saying too is the USA, if nothing else, is kind of like self-important and very proud of made in USA. I think that if we were to call something the American Single Malt and ship it overseas to be bottled, I think just inherently people would be kind of PO'd to learn about that because they'd be like, why isn't it made in America? At least that's what I would perceive. I think that'd be a little weird.
It's funny you said, well, I worked on the border for 4 years, from 96 to 2000 with the DEA. We saw Dodge pickup trucks coming across from Mexico in the United States, and they were going to be shipped to Japan. and the reason why is all the safety features we require in the United States, they didn't require over in Asia. And so they were actually assembling them in Mexico, bring them into the United States, and then ship them out of the country. And yet people think they're buying American pickup trucks when actually they're made down in Mexico. But
sure. which even if I think there is something to be said, even if you do get a quality product, if we assume we're getting a quality product, we don't want duplicity on any level. That in and of itself is insulting to the consumer. And once it is revealed, it makes everyone think, well, what else are they fucking around with? What else are they messing with?
Realistically, I think that there's some politician out there who could make a good name for themselves by promoting the American Single Malt and making a big statement about it being 100% American, made here, bottled here, sold here, put on the world stage as the American Single Malt.
Sure. I don't want the government involved. I want just the whiskey association involved. Government will just fuck it up. That's what government does.
We got to get their blessing to through the TTB. Did I get the acronym right? Yeah. Trade Bureau there. Tax and Trade Bureau. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Well, they would make it a legal standard.
Right. I mean, that's kind of what they're going for, though. That's the whole goal.
That is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Now, I do want to bring up another question I had. I think I alluded to it earlier. Right now, Ireland and Scotland, and pretty much anywhere in the world that you call it single malt, but under the law, Ireland and Scotland, single malt has to be distilled in pot stills. Should that be a requirement for American single malt, or are we going to allow column stills?
I was just thinking. I'll tell you what Bill was saying. I would get a hat. It should say MAGMSA, Make American Single Malt Great Again, and add that on a hat.
I'm sure that wouldn't cause any controversy whatsoever.
Yeah, there you go.
No, not at all.
Yeah, we had our whole Make America Peated Again, and we had to come up with the other poster over here for make sure people knew we weren't partisan. We just love Pete.
I'm sorry I mean to derail the train here. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
So for the people who don't know, who are watching in the chat, Ed, what would you think would be the essence of the difference between something coming out of a pot still or a column still, and does that affect the essence or identity of what we think of as a single malt? I think that's the issue you got to address.
Sure. I think to my mind, the biggest difference, the most important difference may not actually be the still itself. It may be the proof to which a whiskey is distilled. Now that is another thing we can discuss. I think that may be an even more important issue. However, but that's not how they do it in Ireland and Scotland. They're focused more on pot still, column still. The argument goes, right, that pot still gives you more flavor, more oiliness. You can collect, you're getting more congeners because as this thing boils and the onion shape allows more congeners to pop up into the line arm. Therefore, you get a more flavorful whiskey, depending on the design of the pot itself. But that said, how much of that is really based on the pot still being the best technical apparatus for making malt, and how much of that is simply because that's how it was traditionally done for, since, 1300 back in the day. I think that's why the question is, can a column still make just as good malt whiskey as a pot still if you distill it to the same proof and put it in quality barrels?
Not unless you age it for 25 years.
What was that?
Not unless you age it for like 25 years. That's just what I found. This was Scottish stuff. I mean, your single grains and it's seriously usually 25 years where it sucks. What I found, it's usually just so grainy and nasty.
But is that due to the type of still being used or to the base ingredient? That's what you have to determine.
Could be both. I mean,
Goramagut.
What American single malt is made on a column still? Do you guys know of any? Because I don't.
I don't actually. I think, to be fair, Menominee, I think, is actually doing a hybrid still.
Okay,
for your smaller distilleries, the hybrids are the most common.
Yeah, hybrids. I'm not really surprised. That's pretty common.
Yeah, but I don't know of anybody who's actually doing just a pure column still right now.
I don't think there are that I'm aware of.
There certainly are people who are doing straight malt in a column still, but I don't think anyone's calling it single malt at this point.
Do you think it would hurt the reputation or the image of single malt if you used a column still?
I think it does.
No,
I don't think it would. I think it would ultimately.
You guys don't think that column stills kind of have a negative connotation?
They do because you make blends. It's an inferior connotation being used as a column.
Right. I mean, that's my initial reaction to that. Without thinking too much about it. I mean, pot still does feel, like you said, Ed, like done because that's historically how things were done. I don't know. But I also feel like column stills are kind of, when I think column still, I think Canadian whiskey, which I'm immediately just kind of like, So,
well, there you go. You just made my whole argument. You made the whole argument right there.
Yeah, right. Well, and Steve A brings up a good point. Is it's not just ingredients and it's not just the shape of the still. It is also distillation points. Because bourbon, the vast majority of bourbon is made with a column still, but it's only distilled up to 80%. I don't think anyone would argue that bourbon is flavorless, even though it is made out of mostly corn and is distilled in a column still, just like Scotch grain whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
Look at back to an image of and history. So, innovation, and we like to do things new here in the United States versus tradition. And all that.
All that.
I've got the beard going on there. But so the question is, in terms of branding, image, history, and sort of tipping the hat to tradition, do you say, hey, no, let's keep it pot still in order to maintain some connection, historical connection to our old world relatives over there making malts?
Sure. And Mash and Drum says, a good point. Column still is essentially for making giant amounts.
Right.
I do think pot still is superior. I do think it makes more craft, takes more attention to make good whiskey on a pot still. That said, I do think part of the reason people want to use pot stills for American single malt is based on, a certain nostalgia and a certain, that old timey feeling that whiskey has. And I kind of don't necessarily appreciate, I feel like whiskey does need to start to move a little bit away from a lot of, you think about bourbon, it has a certain look. It always has a certain look. It always has a certain feel. And then it's kind of an old Southern boy kind of thing. Scotch and Irish always leans into this twee Gaelic bullshit. I think American Single Malt has the opportunity to push that mindset in a different direction. Maybe a column still could be part of that. Not necessarily that you have to use a column still.
And Vikings. Don't forget the Vikings.
Yeah.
I like that. I think I'm going to kind of just, I'm not going to go back on what I said about Canadian whiskey, but I do think that it probably, especially because they're not even asking for it, and let's face it, they're the ones that really have a lot of vested interest here, probably doesn't make sense to limit what they could distill in, especially because the market will help them to decide. If there's a certain kind of taste that's coming out of these column stills being, I think, was it somebody said mass produced for the most part in column stills, I think it was Jason, that might make a certain kind of flavor. It might turn people off and they'll stop doing it or they'll fail.
Or somebody will find something intriguing and interesting and it'll work. And they'll be like, damn.
Your exception is like Nika, with their coffee stills, which Lachloman has them as well. Of course, they don't let them use a coffee distillers designation in Scotland. But besides those two, that's the only two I know of that make really good whiskey off of them in that style. It's malt.
And just for the viewer, if you don't know, a coffee still and a column still, same thing.
Yes.
Oh, right. And then it also gets confusing because people have heard of Loman stills.
Right.
Yeah. It's all continuous still. Yeah. When you use the term column, you're referring to a continuous still.
Right.
Yeah.
But the coffee takes away the connotation of it.
Yeah. Now,
makes it sound
Steve A just
fancier.
Oh.
Yeah, it's breakfasty.
I do get
you're going to confuse them. Don't confuse the consumer. That's rule number one.
Why is this coffee? Why do we have coffee flavored gin? When they see the coffee gin from Nika, what's with this coffee flavored gin?
Steve A put out something there that I think is kind of reflective of what we're talking about too, and he would be coming from the point of view of somebody buying, right? Consumer. He's saying that if the product's good, he doesn't care if it's pot or column still, and that's kind of going exactly to what I was just saying. Let them do whatever they want, and the market will decide. So, I'm totally with you, Steve.
I think I misled Mark a little bit. Loch Lomond is made with a pot still. A Lomond still is a different.
They're different stills there. They have multiple stills.
Yes.
It's a cool distillery.
There's only two active Lomond stills in Scotland. One's used for making gin at Bruichladdich, and the other one's up at Scapa up in on Orkney.
Oh,
and it originally it was sort of a experimental still that you could make adjustments, and so it was like a quasi pot, quasi column still, and it didn't really work out all that well. So Ugly Betty at Bruichladdich, that's a Lomond still.
Yeah, that button is a good gin too.
Nick P is asking, is there one American single malt that people think is the epitome of the category?
Mm-hmm. Good question.
I mean,
what do you think?
I have a reactive answer.
No.
Westland, I think
what Westland is doing is really,
that's one of the best.
Yeah, that's what I think of and kind of what they put out. So
them and Balcones, that's my standard bearers.
Yeah, but you're from Texas.
But
true, but it's excellent whiskey.
When we tried Del Bach,
also great.
Yeah, they're doing now. What's funny is Del Bach has a little bit of that sagebrush kind of kick in it that some of the Texas ones do as well. So you can tell when that heat is in play.
We say that, but McCarthy's been around since 1985. I mean,
God,
these
I
guys
love
are the
McCarthy.
old school. I mean, they've been doing this a long time.
Oh, I
Yep,
love McCarthy.
I love
And
McCarthy.
it's phenomenal whiskey.
Yep.
Hard to find, but really good.
I do think for overall for single malts, I do think my Balcones. I will always go with Balcones. That said, McCarthy's is so good. I think and this is why I do think we are going to develop categories, just because that Pacific Northwest style of McCarthy's is a whole different beast than this guy right here. So
yeah.
I think depending on your mood, you really can find different stuff. And even then, like you think about something like Colkegan, which is not that far from Texas, but this has its own thing going on too.
Mm-hmm.
This is where out of Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Yeah, it's Santa Fe.
Yeah. Still got a kind of a similar Southwest, heavier tannic flavor, but that mesquite element, that whole different thing. People are doing weird, different stuff, and I think there's a lot of different things to, experiment with and figure out.
Yeah, they do apple brandy cask is amazing there with that finish on it. It's one of my favorite whiskeys, but it's so hard to get.
Hey, Fred Still is in. Good to see you, buddy. Thanks for stopping by. I do want to bring up one thing though, and this is something I assume we can all agree on. But I'm not. I guess I shouldn't. I shouldn't.
Whatever Bart says, I'm going to disagree because he's always wrong.
That's right.
So this is Old Potrero. This is labeled as a single malt,
and that's in my neighborhood.
This is 100% rye malt. I love it. I love rye malt. That said, we should not be able to label this as single malt.
Yeah.
In no reasonable world would this be labeled single malt.
And that's from Petaluma, right?
I talked to them about it. They said that because it's only one type of grain, that's why they're allowed to call it. Which technically they're right. It's malted rye. Technically, it's a single malt. It's just that no one's when they buy it goes, oh yeah, it's definitely a freaking rye, because that's what everyone would think. Granted, it's great whiskey, but no one's thinking that's going to be a rye rather than a barley. It's stupid on their part to put that on there.
I think Dustin's saying it's all malt, right? And yes, it is all malt.
It's all malt, technically.
But that's not what people think when they hear the word malt.
So here's the issue with that. When you a Scottish single malt, when you say single malt Scotch whiskey, that's an abbreviation because they can't fit the whole thing on the label. It's actually single distillery malted barley Scotch whiskey. But if you put all that on a label, it wouldn't fit. So when they say malt, they're implying barley. When they say single, they're implying distillery. You have to know that that's included in the definition. So to say single malt, traditionally, that's been understood as saying barley.
Right.
That's like when you say Bart, you don't think of Scott.
Thank you.
Right? You think of Bart.
I think you could get away with saying single. There may be some room where you could do single rye malt, single distillery, rye malt.
That's a good idea. No problem with that.
Yeah.
Just from a consumer standpoint, it makes sense.
That might even make me buy it. I would be like, wow, that's 100% rye, malted rye. I want it.
It's delicious.
All right, you can't say that because I'm supposed to disagree with you.
Damn it.
I think that's the point, is that technically, yes, you can malt just about anything, but in the common parlance, the expectation is always going to be malted barley.
Right.
Yeah.
Because barley is the easiest grain to malt. You can malt corn. It's just not very effective.
Right. And they can't even claim that like they ran out of space on their label. I mean, you can fit 3 more letters. Like that to me seems kind of like they're just trying to get away with something. Yeah.
Well, it's California.
Well, and the TTB has created a category, right? They've created a malt rye category, which opens up the door to things like this. But that said, again, then in that case, you shouldn't put it single malt. You should put straight rye malt, as you would label any other rye malt whiskey. Nothing against Old Potrero. I love this stuff. It's good stuff, but
Okay. Has anybody ever had this? The Pine Barrens from Long Island Distillery, that are bottle and bond single malt.
No.
Never freaking heard of it.
Yeah, it's same guys that make Rough Rider. This is their bottle and bond from the distillery.
Hey guys, Matt has a whiskey that we've never heard of.
Shocking.
Surprise. This is one of the weirdest whiskeys. It tastes. It's like in a forest. It's bizarre.
But I think though when you think of something, it should remain true to it, right? So if you go, oh, this is an opera, and someone's going, it's like no, that's not opera. Opera is fat people going, la la la, la 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 la. That's opera. Rock and roll is okay, or okay, that's bluegrass or country music or something.
But then someone comes out with a rock opera.
I think you need to stay true to country.
You need like a third channel.
But I think it needs to stay true to what you think of when you think of single malt.
Sure. So what innovations and what new, like, obviously we want to have a bedrock of what we expect single malt to be, but what are the areas where we would like to see people push this category and change things up and do things differently?
Casks, different kinds of casks is fine. X wine, X port, X rum, X whatever. I don't want to see pickles or herring. I did that in Scotland a long time. It didn't work out really well.
Well, actually, so this conviction. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Matt.
I said the first time I was on a stream with Ed, that's what he was drinking. He almost vomited that pickled herring up. It was horrifying.
Oh my god, yes.
So gross.
Oh, we lost Ed.
It was so bad Ed left.
I think Ed pulled
He
the
was just
plug.
thinking about the pickled herring. So this is Courage and Conviction from Virginia Distillery Co. This is to what you were saying, like just put it in any kind of cask. So they do former sherry, sure, whatever, that's not new. And then cuvee, which obviously they're not the first ones to do that, but that is not super common. I love the idea of American single malt going nuts. I mean, just like I like scotches doing it too, with different types of finishes. I think it's like really the area to expand on any sort of whiskey to kind of stay within the guidelines. But when you put it straight on the label, like there's no question, oh, okay, that was finished in, I mean, I have a Chardonnay cask Glenmorangie up there, which is terrible, by the way. But I've heard there's other ones doing well with Chardonnay casks. So I love the idea of finishing whiskeys in general.
The 10-year Glenmorangie Chardonnay is actually good compared to the regular Glenmorangie Chardonnay.
Which one's good?
The 10-year version of the Chardonnay from Glenmorangie is much better than the regular one.
Yeah, I think it's a no age statement.
I'll have to add that to your Wheel of Doom.
I have a package I'm prepping for you, Matt.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
finally, I'm going to return the favor.
All right.
I'm going to send you some bottled water.
He's back.
Fantastic. I might need it. You never know.
Ed is back. He's muted again.
We can't hear you, Ed?
No sound, Ed.
I think his battery. You got to get one of those plug into the wall fake batteries for the camera. Those things are key. So while waiting for him, so I actually reached out to a couple of different distilleries because I've done things with most of these guys to ask them about this exact thing, kind of get the word right from the horse's mouth. Not a whole lot that we haven't discussed here, but one thing I thought was interesting, it kind of reflects back to what we were talking about, is I asked specifically what kinds of challenges are facing American whiskey distilleries that you see coming, what kind of laws or mandates have affected you in recent years. And then this woman, Amanda Beckwith, who's with Virginia Distillery Co., she says basically having a clearly defined and regulated category is crucial because not only would it protect our products and inform consumers about what they're drinking, it would grant legitimacy and recognition to the category, which I feel is kind of the theme that we've been touching on so much tonight, which is nice to see that reflected in somebody. She's one of the Virginia Distillery Co. is one of the founding members of the American Single Malt Whiskey Committee. I forget what the C stands for.
It's, commission.
Commission, thank you. Yeah. But I don't know if you guys read. There's a website. I'll post it in the chat here where they talk all about exactly what they're trying to do. Let me tell you, if you guys are having trouble going to bed tonight, it's good to read. It's a little long-winded, but it does very much tell you what they're trying to do with American single malt whiskey, and it's interesting to see there's not a ton of rules that they're trying to go for, and I think that's smart, kind of going forward, because you don't want to lock yourself into too tight of. Hey, Ed.
Hello. How embarrassing.
What'd you do?
I thought I had that camera plugged in to the wall. I thought it was plugged in, and it wasn't. So
Well, you're good.
That'll
The
do
show
it.
just drove on.
thank you, Top Shelf. I know I saw that I had missed that when I was putzing about with the camera. So I
Scott,
don't know what this means, but precision in terms on Scotch is not something we want to replicate in the States. Either broaden the terms or add more clarity. Just ask the difference in blends. Okay, Goramaga. Thank you, my dude.
I do
Scott
wish that
texted
blend would
me.
play everything's in them.
Scott texted me and said I'm supposed to say that we have Kilkeegan and Westward single malts, and that when his taster is back, we shall test it. I think I was supposed to yell that part, but
We need you to yell at Bart. Come on, you can do it.
test it. I wasn't sure when he wrote that in. I thought, no, I won't do that on someone else.
How many exclamation points did he put after it? If it was none, that's on him.
Yeah, no, there was none. Well, real quick, because I have American Single Malt Whiskey's Commission's Standard of Identity up. So made from 100% malted barley, distilled entirely at one distillery, mashed, distilled, and matured in the United States of America. So there's that question.
America.
Matured in oak casks of a capacity not exceeding 700 liters.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Distilled to no more than 160 U.S. proof, 8% alcohol by volume, and bottled at 80% proof or more than 40% alcohol by volume.
Sure.
So that is it. That is all they have on there. And then Scott saying, tell Ed I sent him an email to send me an invite and he'll come in. I think I don't know. Do you want him in? That's too many. I don't want him encroaching. That's
okay,
very
real quick.
pushy.
Yeah, I got you. Here, let me
That's
send
very
you the,
pushy.
Let me send you a link
Look
right
at
here.
Hey, Ed,
I'll put it.
I'll take care of it if you want to keep kind of doing what you're doing.
I'll
You're
put it
the
in
host. You
right
shouldn't
quick.
be.
There we are. Let's just open this up. It's all good.
Pushy.
But that is something that's interesting. They say specifically oak because I mean, the Irish. We mentioned this earlier. Open it up to other kinds of wood like acacia with the Bushmills release. I wouldn't mind seeing that. I think that would actually be pretty cool.
Yeah, leave the oak part out. Let them choose any kind of wood.
Hey, we got Robert Licorice is here. He was
Oh,
somebody I emailed.
Robert!
I actually emailed Robert for his opinion on this whole subject earlier as well today. He had quite a bit to say. It's interesting to see, like the people that I was talking to. I don't, even though some of them are responsible for marketing, they don't come off as marketing people. Like they just generally seem like people who are interested in growing the whole industry. And Robert obviously is definitely one of them. So,
Yeah. I think
As long as we have a couple minutes, if anybody wants to hop into the chat, Robert, you're welcome to come in and give us some opinions. I know Scott was trying to.
we need another Texan in here, like we need another hole in the head.
Do like
For someone who's a member of their association, you are very belligerent towards them.
We need more gold people in here. That's what
Yeah, he needs it.
Well, that'll be here soon enough. It's fine. He's 50.
This side over here just kind of smells like old people.
Look at this. Just because you can't grow a beard.
Oh my god.
That's true. I grow like the worst beard. I tried once. It just nah. I've got none here, very little here.
We had that feeling about you.
I'm just glad Bart stopped dyeing his beard and it looks natural now, so that's good.
So, do any of you have a particular favorite single malt, American single malt? Hey, Scott.
Hey, Scott.
Hey, Scott. How
Hey,
you
guys.
doing?
Yeah, I do.
Bart's offended. He's like, no, don't bring Scott in here.
Yeah.
I'm opening this up, Bart, just because you was talking.
Yeah, but we got them split up. We got one over here and got one way over there.
Yeah, no, it's bookends.
And I'm going to open up this Cole Keegan too. Just
you don't need to open.
What is
you don't need to
that?
open
You're gonna
anything
open
up.
something?
That's
What
all
the
wasted
blue
on
one?
you. That's wasted on you. Put it back.
You can still make him happy. You know.
What is this blue Kilkegan? What the hell's in that bottle?
Oh,
Yeah,
that's a
Look at
10th
that.
anniversary one.
You got Matt.
They sent us, and it was back probably in October or right before I got
Cool.
COVID.
You got Matt
Except that
interested right there. You
I
got
haven't
close
seen
to
that
the
one.
screen.
That's
You got-
exciting.
You got right
10th
up on it.
It's their 10th anniversary, 4-year-old sherry cask finished single malt.
Nice.
And if I can read the ABV on here, I can't. It's too dark.
It's part of the COVID.
50-some%, it looks like.
Yeah.
I will say that is something that excites me. If American Single Malt keeps proliferating, more sherry cask malt for me. That is awesome. I'm excited for that.
Except for that.
Always more sherry cask.
See, but I don't like that Stranahan's sherry cask is so musty. Whereas I usually like sherry cask a lot. I just don't like that one in particular.
You know, what, Eric? Thank you, Eric.
Whoa.
Gorama, good. Thank you.
I don't know how to follow that.
Does that? I feel like I gotta do a Malort swig for that. No one's asking to do those.
We're in your no. Yeah, later.
But yeah, Scott, I wanted to see if you had some opinions. Maybe you wanted to share anything about American Single Malt and your thinkings on our discussion.
No, I like it. Bart is definitely into them. Got into them a lot earlier than I did. I still like it. Stranahan Sherry Cask is a good one. I would concur. I think Westward, when people think of American single malts, Westland, I think is the first name that comes to mind. I think they really probably started American single malts, or at least mainstream anyway. And I've been impressed with a lot of different ones that we try. Balcones is doing some good ones as well. Y'all's conversation on the different still types, a little bit geeky there. I got to admit, I don't follow still types quite as much as some of you guys do.
You know, that's why I never invite Erica onto these particular streams, because she doesn't give a fuck. She just wants it to taste good. And every time I start talking about like stills, she just goes, "That's some fucking nerd shit."
You know, Eric said, "You know how many column stills there are in Scotland?" And I thought, well, shit, every distillery's got several. You know, stills.
Mash Bill, everybody, go subscribe to the Mash Bill. He's recently popped 100. So let's keep that momentum rolling. Let's get him up to 500 next. He says, "Congrats to 50K, Bill. I saw that recently. That's awesome.
Thanks.
That's fantastic."
Thank you.
And then, what is he also saying? Eric, did the Ardbeg committee let you back in yet?
Yeah, but I had to get recircumcised.
I feel like there's a joke there between the sheep and Eric and the whole black thing. I don't know.
Dustin says, "I have to pour my best whiskey to honor Eric." That is fair. That is fair. What is my best whiskey right now, though? Let me think for a second. I'll think on that.
Should be an American single malt, though.
Probably my best American single malt, right? That's what we
How many
should
of us
do.
have the Balcones single malt? Just thinking, like, if we could actually all share a dram.
I'm drinking the Falconer's peated single malt.
Okay.
I have like 35 to 40 balcones, so sitting
Oh,
around
that's
here.
it? That's all
That's
you
it.
got? God, dang. You need to open up the wallet a little bit.
I know, clearly. No, I just need balcones to send me some more. That's all.
I'm going to join you there. Ooh, I feel like, I've been running my space heater down here. I'm down in, like, my basement in this little office thing that I built. And I run my space heater a lot. I feel like I might be drying out my corks. Have any of you guys had that issue?
I thought you were going to tell us the brand of your space heater.
Oh, God, it's like Walmart piece of crap. I don't know.
That was your
American
first.
standard.
Now, where is it? Cohen is saying Bourbon Bites is on now. I do want to get give him his space because I know we share quite a few viewers. So
You bet.
everybody, go over to Bourbon Bites. Make sure to go watch his live stream. I think we're going to finish up here.
Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already subscribed to this channel.
All that bullshit. You know,
I'll do that.
as soon as you guys are gone, no one's going to want to watch my ass. Come on.
Whatever.
Give him a thumbs up because you can't give him one of these.
Oh my goodness.
Any
totally happen.
closing statements, real quick, guys? Anything coming up that you want to promote?
Burnt orange on the Scotch Test Dummy Show. Coming soon.
There you go. All right. Well, until next time, thank you, everybody. And thank you, everyone who's watching. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay rotten.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cilantro.